And I believe we are now live. So, welcome to Bobble Pod, everybody who has got up early and actually started streaming at 10 a.m. We thank you very, very much. Bobble Pod is part of Leeds Digital Festival. It's the launch of our first ever podcast, episode 1, Brand Social Responsibility. For anyone streaming in, you can join in the conversation on YouTube by putting something in the chat, and we'll take your thoughts as we go through the discussion through today. The event will last around about 40-45 minutes in total, at which point I'd like to introduce all the hosts that we have. So I am Manni, CEO of Bobble digital marketing agency based in Leeds. I'd like to invite the rest of our hosts to introduce themselves.
Oh, good morning, folks. It's absolutely lovely to be here. I'm Keith Loveday, Director of Loveday Media, a brand and creative agency based in Huddersfield, and looking forward to connecting with you all.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Claire Daniels, CEO of Trio Media. We're a fully integrated digital marketing agency based in Leeds, working with small to medium businesses on their digital marketing. Really looking forward to being part of the Bobble Pod today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anush Mnatsakanyan, co-founder and CEO of Burnwe, a video marketing agency, and I'm really glad to be here today and join you as a co-host.
Fantastic. So these will be the 4 co-hosts that will run every podcast that we do. We'll be running it monthly, and we'll give you more information about that towards the end in terms of how you can subscribe. For anyone on YouTube, do subscribe to our YouTube channel because we will be sharing all our podcasts and post-event videos on there. So as we said, today, episode 1 of Bobble Pod is all about brand social responsibility. So I'm going to kick it off as part of the discussion to begin with is, with everything that's gone on in the last 6 months with COVID-19 affecting all organisations and businesses, small, medium to large, we need to understand what impact has that had from an organisation's point of view in terms of promoting their social responsibility. What have brands been doing throughout all of those elements? So right now I'm going to put the question out to all my hosts is, how should brands be going about promoting their social responsibility, and how should they be delivering that execution? When we consider people like Coca-Cola, for example, who we knew at the start of COVID-19, instead of taking back their ad spend, gave their ad spend towards TV and wider channels to charities and organisations supporting the COVID relief at that time. How should brands now go about promoting their social responsibility?
I think, Manny, that's a good point, because I know over the period we've been locked down, the 6 months so far, we've actually seen some very good messages and clear good things come out of this from various brands. From things like the furlough scheme that the government brought in, where they paid staffs 80% of their wages. A lot of brands have topped it up to 100%, such as Timpsons and Whitbreads. And then we've also seen a lot of quite quick, basically caring messages come out of brands like Pret A Manger, who have helped the NHS by giving them free drinks and 50% off of basically all their stuff that they sell there. So that's quite nice. So I think that's really good to see how the brands can put out a caring message.
Yeah, I think that really makes sense for brands to be doing. And the Pret A Manger example is a perfect example of how businesses can use corporate social responsibility for a commercial aspect. Don't get me wrong, obviously the messaging is all around caring and the promotion of their support to the NHS staff, but ultimately when you're thinking about who are you going to go to for a coffee, it's going to be Pret A Manger. And obviously those are the people, the frontline workers going out to work every day. Whilst the footfall of the office workers may not have been around so much, Pret A Manger saw an opportunity to go, well, let's make sure that the traffic that is out there we're getting. So I think there's a bit of a scale really, isn't there, in terms of complete charitable, everything, doing the right thing by people, to this other end of potentially profiteering.
Well, I think when you mention profiteering, Claire, I mean, quite clearly we saw in the early stages as our Prime Minister Boris and the Chancellor Rishi put together support for all the business community in the UK and created things like the Sybil's loans and the bounce back loans, talking with the Treasury then basically to loan the banks money at incredible rates that we've never seen before. I think please correct me if I'm wrong, it was something like 0.1 to 0.3%, which we've never seen before. And unfortunately, some of the high street and global brand names in the banking industry, we saw actually sticking to what they would normally send interest rates out to. So supporting banks by saying, well, look, we need it at 12%, which I think one of their statement from one of the brands actually said, well, actually, this is industry standard. And it's like, well, actually, guys, if you look out the window, it's not industry standard anymore out there. It is actually a pandemic. And, you know, it's kind of like, what can you do? What kind of message does that actually give? Not just the business community in the UK, but also the general public. And I'm sure that basically if everybody decided to close their accounts and move it somewhere else, the global brands there wouldn't be too happy. But what do you guys think?
Go ahead, Anush.
Yeah, if you let me, I'm totally agree with you, kids, about the messaging, because it's more important the message that you provide during this period than exactly the selling period. Because to be honest, in brand social responsibility campaigns, what's more important is selling your brand, but not selling your product. So if we talk about the COVID-19 situation, because what happened in the beginning of this year, it was cardinally different that was happening before, when brands were organizing their brand social responsibility campaigns before. They have changed totally after pandemic. So if I talk from the video point of view, even the types and formats of videos were really changed, totally changed. So before, if they're created like documentary filming, seminars, or just bringing live their brand social responsibility campaigns, after pandemic, actually everyone started create short videos and educational videos mostly. So they have started shooting like restaurants shoot it, cooking shows, gyms started creating home workouts. So this is really good way to help people during this period. And this is another point of view of brand social responsibility for me.
Anush, while you're talking about videos as well, do you see, you mentioned sort of like brands changing what they actually push out there as content, but have you actually seen an increase in personal content from the brands? They actually get to know people more whilst they're in there, and what they're kind of like doing to cope with COVID-19?
Yeah, exactly. If actually before pandemic, everyone was just saying that sure, you need to create short videos. But after pandemic, everyone is encouraging to create longer videos, but more videos that have personal and human touch in them, because people actually like hearing about human stories. So this is really good way to share some human touches around the videos, because everyone was stuck at home. No one was seeing their friends and relatives during this period. So video is actually and is the best way to create any human touches during this period. And as everyone was at home, so social media was very, very active during this period, and even have 40% increase Instagram and Facebook lives during this period. So this is,
and I guess Clive yourself and Manni yourself actually seen an increase of people communicating via the smartphones and laptops at home through this period as well.
Yeah, well, I saw something online that said brands are closer to consumers than ever before, because we're now seeing brands through the same medium that we're seeing our friends and family. You know, we used to be much closer to friends and family because we had that face-to-face, real-life interaction, and then adverts, online, you know, digital content was through a screen, whereas now everything's through a screen. You know, that interaction that we're having with our closest family and friends. I mean, yes, it's relaxing a little bit now, but how it's been over the past 6 months, it's all been through that. So there's actually a real opportunity there for brands to break through and be a lot more personable. And it's resonating a lot easier with consumers, because that's now how they're used to communicating.
Is that because we've been forced into lockdown? COVID-19 has resulted in all of us as consumers kind of rely on digital devices to communicate and get that human touch. So is it the flip side in that, in terms of brands have come closer to us, or we've gone to the channels to be closer to the brands where they can, maybe the word is exploit or profiteer from that by using, you know, their social responsibility, promoting that through video, through channels like social media to get in front of the consumer. And the question I have, should they be doing that to promote their brand? Because if it was a recession, I would understand, because as a business they're trying to survive. But yes, a recession economy is where we are right now. However, at that time, it was a global pandemic. So is that where unity needs to be shown, or should commercial be at the forefront of every company's mind?
I think that's the difficult question, is that we are all people. You know, even people running the large corporations, they're run by people, but those businesses have an obligation to continue making money, to be able to keep their staff in jobs, and everything like that. So I think it's a really fine balance between the two, because businesses have to do what they can to survive, but we've got a survival element from that personal point of view. Like, personally, we are at risk of what is going on right now. You know, we all have to survive, but businesses have got to find a way. And I think really my point of view would be businesses have got to do anything they can to adapt, and it's sink or swim. So those that can should and will. And this happens all the time, you know, take away outside of a pandemic. In the UK, for example, especially in London, the capital, you know, black cabs used to dominate the taxi market. And when Uber came along, the black cabs hated Uber. Uber cars aren't allowed to have branding on in London because they got so many insults. The black cab drivers would be driving past shouting at them. But it's a case of innovate or get left behind, you know, and the black cab industry can't be upset that someone had a better idea and technology moved on. And I think that's where we are. Yes, it's the catalyst of it all is this global pandemic, but it's just another changing of the tide in terms of brands having to move on, learn something new, learn to communicate in a different way, and keep in touch with their customers.
Are big brands overshadowing what local businesses are doing then in terms of brand social responsibility? So when you think, we talked about Coca-Cola, we've talked about Pret, we talked about banks, all of them being mentioned, and they're the ones we're talking about now, because they're the ones that have been on online news and social media, the ones being shared. But during this time, smaller businesses are the ones that have been hit really hard. And our listeners on streaming in right now are going to be majority small to medium-sized enterprises. So when we consider them as an audience in terms of how they might have been potentially overshadowed by the likes of the big organisations, what impact is it going to have for them? Consider Pret, they're offering obviously coffees, but what about your local, coffee shop? How are they going to fare? How do they get out in terms of brand social responsibility? How can they cut through the noise without making it too alludious to, being profiteering or commercialisation?
I think there's a lot more support of independent businesses. So interestingly, I don't think consumers would look at it in the same way profiteering if an independent coffee shop was giving free drinks to the NHS versus a Pret-a-Manger or a Starbucks of the world. I think it's all relative when it comes down to the attention that the big brands get versus the smaller brands, because that's just the industry in general. It's always going to be the case. But, personally at Trio Media, we've seen that actually when we have conversation with people and everyone goes, how have you coped during this time? We've been like, we've been better than ever, we've been busier than ever, we've grown our team. So that's the impact of it on us as a smaller business. And that's because our clients are smaller businesses and they're coming to us and saying, well, we need to get online, we need to be more digital, we put this off for too long, but now we need to do it. So I think small businesses are recognising the importance of being digital, from everything through to having a website, advertising digitally, video, and all of that comes with it. They know they need to get ahead now, to keep in the game.
I also think, Claire, as well, for the smaller business, they can actually see what the larger brands are doing, but then how can they adapt something or take that lead and put it into their local community? Because I think there's, if I can focus on the local side of that and get it right and engage in that, they will be remembered more as we go forward. So I don't know if that's helped on the digital side.
I think we've seen a lot of innovation within digital, especially on social media. I'm sure Anush will jump in on this in terms of video. We've seen so many people use, I think we've seen a growth of organic again when Facebook became a pay-to-play format, it's actually, you're seeing a lot more organic elements go through because, again, more consumers within social as a platform spending more times on there. I remember we looked at stats in terms of the increase was around about, nearly 1% globally in terms of new online social users, over 3 billion globally. So as an economy, as an audience size, it's unlimited. And smaller businesses, when being smart, they can use tactics that the bigger organizations have been using from a brand social responsibility message point of view to kind of hit that cut through. And the biggest channel for them is going to be video moving forward, because that's the type of content we've seen the biggest increase of over the last 3 to 6 months.
And I guess as well...
Actually...
Sorry, Anush,
yeah.
you go.
No, go ahead.
And I guess on the business side, on the smaller business side, the technology that we use now to actually network with other business is online video, whereas probably this time at the beginning of March, we'd never heard of this. We wouldn't actually sit down and be comfortable talking to 40 people on a laptop screen, whereas now we do. And not only that, we can actually, meet people up and down the country where would normally network face to face. We would not do that. So I think the technology, as you both rightly said, has moved forward in that way.
Mm-hmm. Actually, for me, what was very impressive that, as we all know, that small businesses who were more affected because of this COVID-19, but it was impressive that big businesses started to support these small local businesses. So maybe you know that Verizon, one of the biggest telecommunication companies, actually started to announced actually a campaign called Paid Forward Life, and helped small businesses by donating $7.5 million, and also created short videos. It was calling like small business spotlights, during which they were showing exactly what small businesses were doing, what's the problem during this COVID-19 period. And we're sharing in their social media channels because they have big audience, and so people can be aware of these small businesses and somehow help them. And besides these videos, they were actually streaming live and encouraging everyone to donate a small amount of money or just buy gift cards. When the businesses were reopened, they could use these gift cards and help them a lot. So this is actually, for me, a really good example of brand social responsibility that big company can do for a small one.
I mean, it'd be good to get those people streaming right now their points of view and actually get involved in the chat. If you're a small, medium organisation, what have you been doing in terms of pushing your brand social responsibility right now? Do get involved, give us some, do tell us through the chat, and we'll mention it whilst we're discussing. So considering brand social responsibility and, the large organisation, I feel like that's played a good part for them moving forward in terms of COVID-19, the pandemic, the global crisis that we're in. Obviously, we're moving into recovery, but obviously here in the UK, I don't know what it's like in Armenia. For Anush, we're looking at more local lockdowns and restrictions and a potential second wave. So there's a lot to be learned. Do businesses start focusing on business messaging or continue evolving that brand social responsibility message to help grow them in the current pandemic and the current environment?
So in the beginning, when COVID-19 just started, maybe everyone was more shocked, so not organizing any advertising or any activities, and we're just sharing information about COVID-19. But after that, everyone understood that helping somehow with this brand social responsibility campaigns, people, is so important. So yes, in my local community and also worldwide, everyone was just doing any campaigns that somehow could help brands or other businesses, or maybe donate money to COVID-19 recovery funds, so somehow they can manage to help people. Yeah,
I think as well, there was that element of knee-jerk reactions at first, like, what do we do to adapt? Anything, let's go, whereas now we're understanding that this really is. I mean, the term new normal has been thrown around for so long, but it really is the new normal now. You know, and it's not just, okay, that was a 3-month stint of we switched things up, we knee-jerk reacted, we put out some different content, and now we go back to normal. No, we're now accepting this is the new normal. So those things that we may have done very quickly and radically, we now need to look at actually a sustained message that can become part of our strategy around this. I think as well, I mean, one of the points that was kind of key for me to discuss was COVID is here to stay now, and actually a lot of our conversation so far and the brand corporate social responsibility stories that we're seeing at the moment are all around COVID. And actually, what about everything else that's going on? Because that all now seems to have taken a back seat. I've actually just partnered up with Rainforest Trust UK because we want to provide them some support around their climate change initiatives, and that's something I'm really passionate about. And we did an event with them last week, and actually they are noticing that those other causes are taking a back seat because everyone just wants to talk about COVID and what they're doing to adapt. And I guess there is that fine line, like we've discussed, of it seeming charitable versus profiteering. And so integrating that properly into, you know, the commercial strategy of the business. But actually, what about all these other things that have been important before? You know, at the beginning of the year, before there was COVID and the rainforests were on fire, everyone saw the pictures, everyone was sharing it online. The rainforests are on fire again and no one's talking about it. You know, there's issues going on in countries all over the world right now. Anush joining us from Armenia, you know, there's wars happening over there, and really it's not getting the headlines it needs.
I guess, Claire, it's not getting the airtime like anything else at the moment. So, you know, looking forward and things like that, when does COVID-19 become, like you said, a new normal and people start focusing back? But how should they be focusing back on retaining the business, growing the business, keeping in touch with customers in the right way more than anything else? And is this, you know, the new norm for 5 years? Will this actually ever disappear? Or will it be like the flu pandemics that we've had in the past, where unfortunately those have been flash in the pans and lasted months, whereas, like you rightly say, I think this is going to last a number of years going forward. Yeah. So what is the balance for businesses? What is the balance for the smaller businesses in what they should be communicating going forward?
Think we're all sick of hearing about it, right?
Well,
you know,
it's a fair point.
We're all so sick of hearing about it as consumers, and I think now it's businesses need to stop talking about it because we're sick of hearing about it and we're getting it rammed down our throats everywhere else. And actually it not be this is our specific reaction to COVID-19 or this is our specific response to home working, but this just movement of this is now how we have adapted, this is us as a business, and we're still going to take you on a journey with us of all the other causes that we're supporting and making sure that they're showing that those parts aren't falling down. I personally would find that very refreshing if I saw a business kind of saying, do you know what, we acknowledge all this is going on and we already have now long-term strategies put in place that are accepting that, but we're going to stop talking about it and we're going to bring light to some, in my opinion, more pressing issues such as climate change, you know, or anything like that. So that's my personal view, that actually we need to stop talking about COVID so much and accept that that's part of the world now and move on and make sure we don't leave behind all these other really important initiatives.
So considering that, we're getting some conversation now through stream, which is great. Moving away from the topic that is COVID, because I feel like all businesses have adapted to that and jumped on the bandwagon. And essentially nothing else businesses could do. But we've had an organisation coming in from Roots of Yggdrasil, if I've said that correctly, who said they made daily home exercises videos for the elderly, and increased our reach exponentially overnight. His question is, how do we make community-led content as a small organisation? So what can a business do now to move away from COVID, start creating that community-led content to kind of start pushing out what they're doing in terms of home exercise, because that is part of the new normal now as gyms are closing down. we've seen the impact. However, we've seen also 1.45 billion valuation of Gymshark, so they're doing something right. So equipment is on the rise, but gyms are down and gyms are going up. So in terms of that sector, that's really good. So how can businesses create more community-led content, and should they be doing it, and should video be the way forward?
I absolutely think that video is a massive part of that. I mean, well done to the person who's messaging, because it sounds like he already knows to a degree. He said, right, well, we've straight away started doing these videos and we've massively grown overnight. So that's part of the battle. Doing what feels right. That obviously felt like the natural progression to how do I keep my business going and make my messaging work for my audience and position ourselves in the right way. If you do that and you make it organic and true to yourself, I think it just naturally evolves anyway. And something I've been doing that a friend of mine mentioned to me, and ever since we've been trying to do a lot more of, is this kind of methodology of document, don't create. And if you spend too much time thinking about the type of content you want to create and trying to perfect it, you'll never make it. Whereas if you actually just start documenting things, and we promote video as part of what we do as a digital agency, but we haven't done anywhere near enough of it until COVID has hit. And then there's the element of we need to be doing everything we can, plus a bit of extra time here or there to put video content together. And we've just started organically creating what feels right, jumping on stories, putting a quick video up on LinkedIn. And I think it's encouraging that with your own audience as well. It's kind of lead from the front and they'll follow. If you're creating that great content anyway, let them know how you want them to engage with it, and make it feel really easy and like there are no barriers to getting involved. Just come and create great content with us.
I think what you're saying there, Claire, though, is like create content with authenticity, and actually get it out there from your own personality-wise, and actually that will engage with people better, and then they'll still want to come across and take and consume more, really.
We've had Helen Cliff come in with a really good question, agreeing with Claire, saying charities are massively struggling as well as businesses if we don't start to integrate other causes. What will we do when or if there is no longer that at the forefront?
I think actually on the charity side, we work in the third sector. I've worked in the third sector a long time now, and it's breaking, because a lot of charities actually went out and did events, face-to-face events, fundraising, the actual work that they actually do there. It's now actually taking it back online and creating the content where people can still see what they do and understand what they do. But I think for charities, it's kind of like finding a new way to ask people for donations or funding, whether that is going back to the big corporates or it's actually going to the general public. And kind of the thought there is, how do charities create funding for all pockets nowadays, and how do they communicate that?
I've noticed that a lot of charities right now haven't taken advantage of the Google grant. We've done this with a couple of clients. So if anyone streaming out there and is a charity right now, Google offers a $10,000 per month spend in grant on their platform. I'm going to be honest with you, it's very difficult to get that level of spend away, and you don't get that in cash for you to spend elsewhere, but it's there. As long as you're a registered charity company, you can apply just by going and Googling, Google grants for charities. It also gives you support through other channels. So these things were, available, well before COVID-19, and isn't as a result of something that's happened of COVID-19, but there are funding out there through digital channels for charities to take advantage of, and maybe that's something Google should have done. They should have really pronounced that. Google did a lot supporting small businesses in terms of giving back ad credit, and so did Facebook, so I give them a lot of credit in terms of that sense, but maybe businesses should be focused on how they're helping other smaller businesses, which touched to it.
And I do feel for charities, because the more you think about it, the more you realise how much they will have been hit. I mean, working in marketing, that is always one of the first things that people stop when, budgets get cut. But I imagine charitable contributions also sit in that group of, do you know what, we're cutting back, well, that's going to have to stop. And for so long, charities have been able to rely on the support of these organisations that they partnered with to generate income, and now that that's been stripped back, they're going, well, what do I do now? And I have to start from scratch. And I guess my advice to you know, the person that's messaged in would be, I mean, it's not going to be easy, but is looking at the strategies we're discussing around being online, being digital, creating video content. Like, unfortunately, they are going to have to step up and start doing this, you know, start getting innovative in how am I going to raise awareness to generate new ways of income for the charity, because, you know, the streams that we could once rely on are not there anymore.
Wayne Jackson, thanks for streaming in, has just put a really good question relating to that is, well, if they have to create different types of content through video, through, you know, creative messaging, what would we as the panel define as great content?
I think that goes back to what you said, Keith, about around it being authentic. It doesn't have to be perfect. You know, if you're filming video, it can be filmed on a smartphone. You don't need a full technical setup to be able to create that content. It just has to be authentic and true to you. And if it is, it will always be more likely to resonate with your audience than something that you've thought, I'm going to take 6 months to do this, get a team involved who don't know about my business, and yes, it's going to be all technically fancy and whatever else, but is it true to you? And I think Anush will probably have more to add to that point for sure.
Yeah, that's what I wanted also to tell you, that during this period of pandemic, there was not like big difference. Are you a small or a big company? Because a lot of big companies, even they were at home, so they are started to shoot with their smartphones even and going to live. So no difference about that point of view. What's more important is the content that you are providing during this period. Are they helpful? Are there something that would be very needed for this period? So maybe you know that one of the biggest pharmacy companies, Walgreens, actually organized a small series of videos calling Ask a Pharmacist, and we're sharing an information about COVID-19, all the questions that people could be interested. So this is also one of the ways to help people to be aware of how to be safe during this period. So yeah, that there is no big difference of the quality. What's most important is the content. That's my opinion.
Okay, so when we talk about content, and the topic of this pod is brand social responsibility, is it content that is community-led? Is it content around the good that organisation is doing? Or do they focus more on the sell or more in relation to education? Because that's the approach we've got as an agency, as a small business, is educate. It's why we created the Bobble pod. If we wanted to do it just from our opinion, that would make no sense, but we thought, let's bring in 3 other experts to give their opinion, discuss on what's hot right now and what's important to small businesses to actually make them value that. I think authenticity is key, but also educate. If you are in a specific industry or a sector as a business, whether you're a small player in that market or a big player in that market, as long as you're creating, you know, content that educates and help answers the questions that people will have right now in different industries, whether it's banking, whether it's, you know, charities, and a lot of these questions are coming through now on the stream. These are the questions that we should be answering as organisations. Just have a look around the content that's being shared around you and use that. But I think, you know, moving forward, what's going to be more important now for businesses? Do they focus on their own brand, or do they focus on going back to that, you know, here's what we do, here's what we offer? Or should they adapt and move with the tide, which is educate, authentic, informative content?
Well, let's just look at this for a minute in terms of the topic we're talking about. It comes down to, the word is in it, responsibility. You know, how responsible are you for your audience, your industry, your clients? How responsible is the content you're putting out? And I think if you use that as the backbone to your decision making in terms of, am I being responsible in the content I'm sharing because it's relevant to my audience and it's going to resonate with them? You know, if a business goes wildly off tangent and starts promoting something that isn't really aligned to their target audience, that's not very responsible. That also ties into the piece around the large corporations. They have a much bigger responsibility than the independents do. So that's why they have to be seen to be doing so much more. You know, I think the independents can get away with being like, please shop with me. You know, I would really, really love it if you shopped here right now because I'm struggling. Whereas the large corporations have to be responsible and go, we understand we are multi-million, billion-pound turnover businesses, and we're going to use that revenue responsibly. We need to look after our employees, other stakeholders within the business. So I think if we looked at that, it could all come back down to that cornerstone of if you believe what you're putting out is responsible and relevant to your audience, then the messaging should be right by nature.
Ben and Jerry's comes to mind straight away
excellent.
when you said that. I don't know if anyone saw that tweet, but Ben and Jerry's attacking Preeti Patel. So this is a brand that's built on its own social. I think it's a great example as a company. But I will have to highlight that they did sell to Unilever, which doesn't have to have the greatest brand reputation when it comes to social responsibility, despite all that Unilever do. But in terms of responsibility, in terms of the approach they took when they attacked a senior member of cabinet and considering stakeholders, as you just mentioned, was that the right way to do it in terms of their thread?
Oh, was that, Manni, a knee-jerk reaction to get airtime across, basically? You know, let's just take the responsibility out of you and let's get some news time on this.
But okay, can brand social responsibility then have a negative impact on a brand? Because all you have to do is look at some of the tweets and responses that came through from consumers saying they're never going to buy Ben & Jerry's again. Who are Ben & Jerry's to talk when they're owned by Unilever? You know, why don't you pay your taxes first? Are you opening yourself up when you do that knee-jerk reaction to try to be socially responsible where it can go really, really wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an example of it, isn't it? In that with all the best will in the world, the person most likely putting these messages out is, you know, potentially in your marketing team or someone like that. Do they have every piece of the puzzle? You know, do they know everything that's going on when they, you know, have a great idea, if we're going to put this out, this is going to sound great, but not aware, you know, being aware of the implications 5 points removed from that and not having the foresight to see where it could end them up. So I think absolutely it always has to come down to, is this the right message for us? Is this the right battle to fight? Because when you are a big brand, people will be all too keen to rip you apart if you get it wrong.
I think Diesel got it right. I think they were supporting the Pride colours, and then they highlighted that they lost 14,000 or so followers because they showed their pride, and they celebrated that. And I think that was probably a question came in from Nick in terms of definition of great content. That's a great definition of great content from a brand who saw an opportunity where they were like, actually, we're going to celebrate this because that's 14,000 followers we didn't need if they're not going to support us supporting Pride. I think you can't get...
Well, that's the thing, it's quality over quantity every time, isn't it? You know, if you bring out something that is so spot on and on point, for the people who are actually most likely to buy from you, talk about you, be advocates of your brand, that is far more relevant than something that is going to get you a lot of likes and a lot of reach, but actually it's not going to deliver something tangible.
And I guess when you do something like that, like you said, Manni, they lost 14,000 followers, but, you know, like you rightly said, it was 14,000 that they probably didn't need and only were there to, I don't know, what were they there for? And I think it's great that they actually stood by the guns and the values and got that out there as well.
I think that's a good point then. Should, as small businesses, I think focus more on quality followers as opposed to volume of followers. If you're in a niche or you're in a specific industry out there, try and build your audience based on those that are going to value your content, not just for everyone out there thinking, I just need numbers. It's not a numbers game, I think, anymore. If you want to create authenticity with your audience, if you want to create quality content to those that are going to appreciate or going to understand. And
do you know what, it's just an idea I've thought of now, but in terms of if you thought about you have one follower or one customer, and that person is your ideal customer, and they were the person that you're creating content for, and it's only them that was ever going to see it, create that.
Yeah.
And, you know, from that is going to come that, you know, magic content that's going to engage with wider people because you made it really targeted to the people who are most likely to engage with your brand.
And like you rightly say, Claire, you might, you know, it's better to have niche customers, even if you have various niche customers that actually understand you and value and want to be on your journey, and actually then they will buy from you because they totally understand what you're saying.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to make one more mention. This one's for you, Anush. Is Duncan's just come in saying there's only a few scenarios in video marketing where it needs to be perfect. Story is everything. I think that kind of just elaborates everything we've been saying from a content point of view. But Anush, do you want to get your input on that?
Yeah, but before that, I wanted to just say how I see actually just like in general brand social responsibility campaigns, because for me it's a way of showing that behind the companies there are people. So either you do as a content video or anyway, you need to show people that you do care about the society. Just from like video point of view, it's so easy to do because there is more visual, so you can create stories with the video. That's why it's so easier to reach people. But in any way, either way you choose, it needs to be so connected to your company vision, so people can really get the message that you are not just a profit hungry machine, but there are people in your company that do care about other people. And if I give you just an example about videos, actually there was so many companies, large or small companies, created different campaigns and included video there. So just to give you some examples, maybe you remember at the beginning of coronavirus when everyone was buying toilet papers and there was a like ending in the shops these toilet papers. So one of the biggest actually toilet paper companies, Cottonelle, actually donated $1 million and 1 million roller paper to people, so they will not be afraid about losing. And how they did this campaign actually through video. So they created video around the hashtag calling Share Square, and this is also one of the ways of brand social responsibility. And I can mention like a lot of examples like this, but I hope there is not so much time left.
I love that. And one thing for me that I've enjoyed is seeing how innovative brands have got with video in terms of for creating TV adverts. You know, we kind of expect videos to be a bit more rough and ready when they're on social media, but actually seeing that, you know, top class video advertising for television has been created through people being at home. You know, I think it was Co-op who did one with all the people, you know, filming their own little videos, working from home and putting it together. It shows how, you know, ingenious you can get with these ideas when when you're forced to think outside of the box.
Sure.
You know, and I really enjoyed that.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. So, and a lot of companies, as Claire said, created different videos around the topic and encouraging people to stay at home. It's also, it's not necessarily to share just educational videos, but also some messages, which could be general messages about staying safe and staying at home.
Yeah, and actually, this could open a can of worms, and I know we're about to finish, so I don't expect too much from it, but have our brands in some way been more responsible for getting us the right messaging than our government has?
I would absolutely, I would agree with that. I think, personally, I think the government could have done better in terms of communicating that message, in terms of what it should be, which I think is why we're seeing here in the UK a second wave in terms of being a bit wishy-washy, as people have called it. But I think brands, no matter what happens in a recession, businesses always find a way.
Yeah.
I think they do as well. You know, I mean, good grief, we're in 2020, you know, being told to wash our hands, wear a mask and be alert. It doesn't quite cut it, I don't think, you know. But yes, I think brands actually work harder, think more outside the box.
They have to get it right, don't they?
And basically not be scared of doing it as well. Not be scared of putting their core values and their actual personalities of people that you would never see normally out there.
Yeah. The government have kind of had the flexibility to be able to go, oh, we've changed our mind on that bit of messaging now. We're going to tell you something else. Whereas brands have got to get it right from the start. So they've taken a stance and go, this is who we're going to be. This is what we're going to say. We're going to tell you to stay at home, or we're going to tell you to clap for the NHS, or whatever it may be. And that messaging has come out a lot stronger from the brands than it has from our own government.
But just know that brands do get it wrong as well.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh,
Yeah, and we've seen that with a couple of examples, like Ben and Jerry's and a few others out there that we've seen over time and the impact it's had. We're now up to 45 minutes, so I'm going to bring it to a close, but just shows how much fun you can have when you get 4 experts discussing different topics and where that can go. Hopefully for everyone who's streaming, you found that very, very, very beneficial. So that's episode 1 of Bobble Pod. Our second episode will be launching on the 27th of October. This was the only one we're doing live, just to kind of help launch and push the event. We'll follow with videos and content post-event in terms of how you can access the vodcast and the actual podcast audio across all our channels like Spotify, Apple, and Google. So we'll be in touch with that, and do follow up with the content. We're launching a dedicated website for this, which is www.bobblepod.co.uk, where you can access all the historical events. We'd like to thank everybody who got involved with the conversation on chat, everyone who actually streamed in today. Personally, I'd like to thank everyone in terms of production team, Callum and Josh here to help us, and I'd like to thank all the hosts as well for joining us.
Thank you to our listeners.
Yeah,
thank you for Anush overseas. Yes.
Yeah, and we do hope everything gets safe and secure better in Armenia for you shortly.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
All
Glad
right.
to see you today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Well, thank you for everyone. We're going to call it to an end to our first episode of Bobble Pod, and we look forward to seeing you on episode 2. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Goodbye.
Yeah, we're done.
Really?
We should
Sorry,
we should do
guys,
it.
well done.
Everyone.
That went really, really well. I think as we got into it, everyone just got more and more confident in terms of jumping in and actually having a conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that was great.
Yeah.
Enjoyed that.
Superb. Oh, sweet. Good, yeah.
Yeah.
Teraz mě ty máš banánžates.
Oh, that's quite good.
Škorceny.
That's all right.
In terms of the sign-ups
Yeah.
to people watching live.
Okay, česo.
Great.
Superb.
See you all later.
Great.